Welcome to Life Unscripted Adulting Uncovered, the podcast for anyone out here doing their best to grow, heal, and not totally lose it in the process. I'm your host, Brennan, and if you ever felt like the only adult still figuring it out, don't worry, you're not alone. This is the place for you. Let's stop pretending and start talking.
Guys, welcome back to another episode. You know, if you're somebody that is in your 30s, mid-30s, late 30s, 40s, this episode is really for you. I think in our early 30s and mid-30s, we start to realize some of the things that we had planned for or things we wanted to happen in our life are not happening or haven't happened yet. And we start to reflect that my life may not be going the way that I thought it was going to go. And I'm excluding people in their 20s because I feel like in your 20s, there's a lot of exploration and understanding yourself. Most people in their 20s don't have the clarity and the focus that they need to really design a life with meaning. There are exceptions to that rule, but I think for the most part, the 20s is a very explorative time for people. When we hit this time in our life, maybe it's in your 30s, generally that's where it starts to occur, and you realize, well, what I planned for isn't happening, or it's not going to happen for whatever reason. You can start to feel some grief. And that grief, it doesn't come from losing someone. It comes from realizing that the life you imagined didn't happen, isn't happening, isn't going to happen. And it's not because you're a failure or you didn't try hard enough or you didn't apply yourself, in certain areas. Or look, maybe you didn't. Maybe you need to try harder. I'm just kidding. Life is always busy while we make plans. And there's a term in psychology, it's called ambiguous loss. And this means that you feel you lost someone, but you're not really sure if they're gone. And I guess an example of that would be a missing person. The person is no longer there. You think they might be deceased, but you have not had a funeral, but you're having this pain, right? And you're grieving something that never fully existed in this scenario that we're talking about, in this life that we wanted that hasn't occurred. And maybe that would be a marriage that you thought you'd have. And along with that marriage, there was going to be kids. Or maybe it was a career path that felt really, really guaranteed, and it didn't happen. And maybe that version of you made sense back then. But look, here's some value really early on. Grief does not require death to be valid. It requires attachment. So if we had attachment to that marriage, attachment to this children, attachment to this career, then it's logical that we would have some sort of grieving period about it. And I think the partner example is really easy for me to lean into. Being somebody in my 40s, I can identify with, what we thought we would do when it comes to dating and marriage doesn't always occur. The partner you thought you'd grow old with, sometimes we find that we had this idea of being married or partnered up and life has gone on and now we see that it's not happening the way that we had planned. And I think, especially in today's dating world, it's becoming harder and harder to date with intention because the dating pool is largely populated with people that have a lot of unhealed trauma that they're not addressing and they just continue to float in the dating pool. But that's not what this episode is about. Another example I think is, like I talked about earlier, the version of you who thought by 30, I'd have all these things together. And maybe you're somebody who mapped out your life in these yearly increments and you hit your 30s and you feel more lost and confused as fucking ever. Or maybe there was a career identity that felt really safe and predictable. And then that job, it didn't happen. Or you got this job that you really wanted and you realize it fucking sucks. And it's not what you thought it would be. We don't talk about that grief enough because we tend to have this idea that we feel ungrateful. And we shouldn't be ungrateful. And studies on life satisfaction show people can hold simultaneous gratitude and grief. Suppressing one increases anxiety and emotional numbing. And when we don't process that grief and we minimize it or we shame it or we say, hey, oh my God, I'm being dramatic. When we suppress that, it starts to show up with these reasons, right? Well, other people have it worse. I still have my health, or I should be happy now. Or maybe there's some social pressure for us to just be like, think positive, be positive. And I say that, and it is effective. But in this situation, sometimes we need to lean into just accepting that we're not where we want to be. And when we don't process that grief, it doesn't just disappear. It shows up as restlessness and irritability, numbness. Maybe you're constantly comparing yourself. Well, she did this. My friend that I went to college did that. and they're doing this, and oh my God, this happened to them by this time, and now you're constantly feeling behind. And when you don't grieve the life that you thought you'd have, you keep unconsciously trying to recreate it, or you punish yourself for not living it. That can show up as like being misaligned in relationships or chasing goals that really don't fit you anymore. Or maybe you're overworking to prove your worth. So you're doing 90, 100-hour weeks and you're just waiting for this life to start. And I talked about this in another video about how we have this tendency to put these external markers before we start to live our lives. You cannot commit to the life you're in. You can't love the life you're in if you're still loyal to the life you lost. And look, you're allowed to love your life and still grieve the one that you thought you'd have. The two truths, they don't cancel each other out. They can coexist. And I think, one thing we want to ask ourselves is, what did I expect my life to look like by now? What part is missing? What version of me deserves to be acknowledged? And we're just trying to honor that, right? We're just trying to get some awareness around what we thought we'd have and what we're missing and how it's impacting us. My therapist is always telling me to treat myself and talk to myself like talk to myself like I'm parenting a 6-year-old. And so just having that gentle kindness with myself is so powerful. And I think this is a great example of that. And look, the grief, it doesn't mean you failed. It means you cared about something a lot. And it's okay to have an attachment to some sort of plan that you had for your life when it's not going the way that you thought it would. And maybe the next chapter of your life, it doesn't come from forcing optimism. It comes from finally telling yourself the truth. You're not broken for feeling this. You're human. So practice being kind to yourself and acknowledging where you're at. Listen, I'm going to end there today. If you know someone who needs to hear this, please give it a share. Guys, my name is Brennan. This is Life Unscripted Adulting Uncovered. I will catch you on the next one. Take care.